Are African nations coming together? After many years of mistreatment, African countries are starting to see how much they need each other. A big wake-up moment was when Nigeria's president's plane was taken in France, and ECOWAS didn't do anything about it.
Non è prendere gli africani e spostarli in Europa. La soluzione è liberare l'Africa da certi europei che la sfruttano e consentire a queste persone di vivere di quello che hanno.
This showed everyone in Africa just how important it is to stand together. But the real question is, will they all unite? Let's find out. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, is teetering on the edge of a crisis that could redefine its role in the region. ECOWAS has been hailed as the protector of regional stability for decades, standing tall in the face of military coups and political upheavals. But today, it faces an even more insidious threat: external manipulation from former colonial powers like France. The recent seizure of Nigeria's presidential plane in France started the conversation again. France, the former colonial master with a long history of interference in African politics, has once again reminded West Africa who pulls the strings. But this isn't just about one plane or one country. This is about the future of West Africa's sovereignty and the ability of African nations to stand on their own 2 feet without the shadow of foreign interference. But how is the seizure of the plane and ECOWAS being a puppet or France-related? Well, this needs us to look deep. Starting with a simple question: what's more dangerous, a military coup or a constitutional coup? In West Africa, the word coup often conjures up images of military tanks rolling through city streets, soldiers occupying government buildings, and leaders ousted at gunpoint. But let's take a step back. Is a military coup the most dangerous thing West Africa faces? Or is the real threat something more subtle, more insidious? Enter the constitutional coup, a legal yet equally devastating method of seizing power, one that flies under the radar of international scrutiny but causes just as much damage to democracy. In recent years, West Africa has been no stranger to constitutional coups. Presidents who were initially elected through democratic processes have manipulated their country's constitutions to extend their rule, turning democracy into a facade. These leaders rewrite laws, tamper with electoral systems, and cling to power long past their expiration dates, all while maintaining the appearance of legality. In many ways, these constitutional coups are even more dangerous than military ones. Why? Because they erode the very foundation of democracy, making it nearly impossible for legitimate opposition to rise. ECOWAS, for its part, has been quick to condemn military coups. When soldiers take over, the international community reacts swiftly, slapping sanctions, calling for immediate reinstatement of civilian governments, and rallying for regional intervention. But when leaders manipulate their constitutions to extend their power, silence. No sanctions, no outrage, no calls for intervention. The double standard is glaring. ECOWAS, the supposed protector of democracy in West Africa, has often turned a blind eye to these constitutional coups, allowing leaders to consolidate power under the guise of legality. Why is this? The answer lies in the intricate dance of geopolitics. Many of these leaders have close ties to former colonial powers, particularly France, which has a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. As long as these leaders remain in power, Western nations can continue to exert influence over their policies, their economies, and their resources. Take the case of Ivory Coast, where President Alassane Ouattara successfully acted to secure a controversial third term in office in 2020. Despite widespread protests and accusations of constitutional tampering, ECOWAS was slow to respond, offering little more than a lukewarm statement calling for peace. Why the hesitation? Perhaps because Ouattara, like many West African leaders, enjoys the support of France, which benefits from maintaining a stable ally in the region. As long as leaders like Ouattara stay in power, Western interests in West Africa are safeguarded, and ECOWAS is left in the awkward position of choosing between supporting democracy or preserving its relationships with powerful external actors. But let's not be naive. The real threat to West African democracy isn't just military juntas or power-hungry presidents. It's the external forces that allow these coups to happen in the first place. France, the former colonial master, continues to play puppet master in the region, supporting leaders who serve its interests and turning a blind eye to those who don't. As long as ECOWAS is beholden to these external actors, it will never be able to fulfill its true mission of safeguarding democracy in West Africa. The question, then, is not which type of coup is more dangerous. The real question is, when will ECOWAS finally recognize that both military and constitutional coups are symptoms of the same disease? A disease fueled by external interference and a lack of true sovereignty. Now comes the second question. Why did France seize Nigeria's presidential plane? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. On the surface, the seizure of Nigeria's presidential plane by France appears to be nothing more than a legal dispute over unpaid debts. But let's not be fooled. This isn't just about money. This is about power, control, and the ongoing struggle between West Africa's largest economy and its former colonial master. The fact that France, of all nations, felt it had the right to seize the sovereign property of Nigeria, a country that prides itself on its independence, is proof of the lingering neocolonial power dynamics at play. But why now? Why did France choose this moment to humiliate Nigeria on the world stage? The answer lies in the shifting power dynamics of the region. Nigeria has long been the dominant force in West Africa, both economically and militarily. But in recent years, the country has faced growing challenges, from internal political instability to the ongoing security crisis in the Sahel. As Nigeria's influence in the region wanes, France sees an opportunity to reassert its control, reminding both Nigeria and the rest of West Africa, who still holds the reins. The seizure of Nigeria's plane is not just a legal issue, it's a geopolitical statement. By grounding Nigeria's presidential jet, France is sending a clear message. West Africa may think it's independent, but in reality, its former colonial masters still have the power to interfere whenever they see fit. That isn't just about Nigeria, it's about the entire region. If France can humiliate Africa's largest economy in this way, what does that say about the sovereignty of smaller nations? This incident has exposed the uncomfortable truth that West Africa is still deeply entangled in the web of neo-colonialism. Despite decades of independence, African nations remain vulnerable to the whims of their former colonizers, who continue to exert control over their economies, their politics, and even their national assets. The fact that a French court could unilaterally decide to seize Nigeria's presidential plane is a stark reminder that Africa is still playing by the rules set by its colonial past. But this is not just about Nigeria. The broader implications of this incident are clear. West Africa's sovereignty is still under threat, not from within, but from external forces that continue to manipulate the region's politics and economy for their benefit. And ECOWAS, for all its talk of unity and regional cooperation, has been largely powerless to stop it. The question we must ask is this: how can West Africa truly be free if its former colonial power still holds so much influence? The seizure of Nigeria's plane is just the latest example of France's ongoing interference in African affairs, but it won't be the last. Unless ECOWAS and its member states take decisive action to assert their sovereignty, the region will continue to be at the mercy of external powers. But what can ECOWAS do? Doesn't external influence just paralyze it? The crisis facing ECOWAS is not just about military or constitutional coups. It's about the organization's growing paralysis in the face of external interference. For years, ECOWAS has prided itself on being the guardian of West African stability. But in reality, the organization's ability to act has been severely hampered by the influence of former colonial powers, particularly France. France's involvement in West Africa is nothing new. Since the end of formal colonization, France has maintained a strong presence in the region, both economically and militarily. Under the guise of fighting terrorism, France has stationed troops in several West African nations, including Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. But while France claims to be a stabilizing force in the region, its presence has often had the opposite effect, deepening divisions and fueling resentment among local populations. In many ways, ECOWAS has become a pawn in France's broader geopolitical strategy. The organization, which was established to promote regional cooperation and stability, has found itself caught between the competing interests of its member states and the external pressures exerted by France and other Western powers. This has led to a situation where ECOWAS is often unable to act decisively, hampered by the need to appease its former colonial masters. Take the security situation in the Sahel, for example. For years, ECOWAS has struggled to address the growing threat of terrorism in the region, despite the presence of French troops. Many have argued that France's military presence has only made the situation worse, fueling anti-French sentiment and driving local populations to support extremist groups. Yet ECOWAS has been unable to take a strong stance on the issue, largely because of France's continued influence over the region's politics and security apparatus. This creates a dilemma. ECOWAS, supposedly the protector of regional stability, is being undermined by the very forces it should be countering. ECOWAS is meant to be a beacon of African unity and independence, but its current paralysis highlights a troubling reality. Many of its member states, still reliant on Western powers for military, economic, and political support, are caught in a web of external influence that prevents the organization from functioning as intended. France, through its military presence and economic leverage, continues to play a significant role in the decision-making process of several West African governments. As long as France maintains this grip, ECOWAS' ability to address critical issues like terrorism, political instability, and economic inequality will remain limited. The paralysis of ECOWAS is not just a result of internal divisions, it's a direct consequence of decades of external interference. For West Africa to move forward, the region must address this neo-colonial stranglehold. The first step is acknowledging that the influence of former colonial powers is a barrier to real progress. ECOWAS must regain its independence, not just from within, but from the lingering forces of colonialism that continue to shape the region's destiny. But how? How can ECOWAS break free from this external influence and assert itself as a truly independent regional body? The answer lies in bold, decisive action. ECOWAS must redefine its mission, prioritize regional self-sufficiency, and stop allowing external forces to dictate its agenda. This will require difficult conversations, particularly with member states that have close ties to France and other Western nations. But it is necessary if West Africa is to reclaim its sovereignty. The road to true independence is a long one, and ECOWAS has a critical role to play in leading the way. But first, the organization must confront the uncomfortable truth that its current structure and policies are not working. West Africa cannot continue to rely on former colonial powers for security, economic stability, or political guidance. The region must chart its course, free from the influence of external actors who have no interest in seeing a strong, united, and prosperous Africa. Now the question is, what is Nigeria doing after this recent humiliation? With its presidential plane seized in France and its leadership humiliated on the world stage, Nigeria has been forced to rethink its role in the region. For decades, Nigeria has been the powerhouse of West Africa, a leader within ECOWAS and a key player in regional diplomacy. But recent events have caused Nigeria to question its reliance on ECOWAS, prompting the country to pursue individual alliances, particularly with Niger, a country at the heart of the Sahel security crisis. Why is Nigeria turning away from ECOWAS in favor of individual alliances? The answer lies in the growing frustration with ECOWAS' inability to act decisively in the face of external interference and internal division. Nigeria, like many West African nations, has come to realize that ECOWAS is no longer the strong, unified organization it once was. Instead, it has become a fractured body, paralyzed by the competing interests of its member states and the influence of former colonial powers. The seizure of Nigeria's plane by France was the final straw. For Nigeria, this was not just an insult to its sovereignty, it was a wake-up call. The incident highlighted the vulnerability of West African nations to external interference and underscored the need for a new approach to regional cooperation. Nigeria's decision to seek individual support marks a significant departure from the collective security approach traditionally advocated by ECOWAS. It signals a shift towards a more pragmatic, self-reliant strategy, one that prioritizes national interests over regional unity. This move has profound implications for the future of ECOWAS. If Nigeria, the region's largest and most influential member, is losing faith in the organization, what does that mean for the rest of West Africa? Could this be the beginning of the end for ECOWAS as we know it? One thing is clear: Nigeria's decision to seek alternative alliances is a reflection of the broader disillusionment with ECOWAS' effectiveness. The organization, once a symbol of regional strength and unity, is now viewed by many as a toothless tiger, unable to protect its members from external threats or internal crises. For Nigeria, the choice to forge individual partnerships is not just a pragmatic response to the seizure of its plane. It's a recognition that ECOWAS is no longer capable of meeting the region's needs. But what does this mean for the future of regional cooperation in West Africa? Can ECOWAS survive without the full support of Nigeria? Or will this shift towards individual alliances lead to the fragmentation of the bloc, with each member state pursuing its national interests? These are the questions that West African leaders must grapple with in the coming months and years. Nigeria's decision to seek individual support is a bold move, but it also raises important questions about the future of regional cooperation. If ECOWAS is to remain relevant, it must adapt to the changing dynamics of West African politics. This means addressing the external influences that have weakened the organization and reasserting its role as the protector of regional stability. Nigeria's pivot towards individual alliances may be a sign of things to come. As West African nations grow increasingly frustrated with ECOWAS's ineffectiveness, more countries may choose to pursue their independent strategies. This could lead to the further weakening of ECOWAS and the fragmentation of regional cooperation, with each country looking out for its interests rather than working together for the common good. So, what's the future for ECOWAS and West Africa? As West Africa stands at a crossroads, the future of ECOWAS is more uncertain than ever. The organization, once seen as a symbol of regional unity and strength, is now facing an existential crisis. With Nigeria, its most powerful member, losing faith in the bloc's ability to protect its interests, the very foundation of ECOWAS is being called into question. So, what's the future for ECOWAS? Can the organization adapt to the changing political landscape, or is it destined to become irrelevant in the face of growing internal divisions and external interference? To understand where ECOWAS is headed, we must first acknowledge the challenges it faces. The organization has been hampered by a lack of cohesion among its member states, many of which have competing national interests. This has made it difficult for ECOWAS to act decisively in the face of regional crises, from political instability to security threats. But perhaps the biggest challenge facing ECOWAS is the lingering influence of former colonial powers, particularly France. As we've seen with the seizure of Nigeria's presidential plane, France continues to play a significant role in the politics and economy of West Africa, often at the expense of African sovereignty. As long as ECOWAS remains entangled in this neo-colonial web, it will never be able to fulfill its true mission of promoting regional unity and independence. The future of ECOWAS will depend on its ability to break free from these external influences and reassert its role as the protector of West African interests. This will require bold leadership and a willingness to challenge the status quo. ECOWAS must prioritize regional self-sufficiency and work to strengthen its institutions so that it can operate independently of external actors. One potential path forward for ECOWAS is to focus on economic integration. By fostering greater economic cooperation among its member states, ECOWAS can reduce its reliance on foreign powers and build a stronger, more self-reliant regional economy. This would not only help to strengthen the organization, but also provide a more stable foundation for addressing the political and security challenges facing the region. Another key area of focus for ECOWAS should be security. The region is facing growing threats from terrorism and political instability, particularly in the Sahel. ECOWAS must work to develop a more effective and coordinated response to these challenges, one that does not rely on external actors like France for support. This will require greater investment in regional security forces and a more robust commitment to collective defense. But perhaps the most important step ECOWAS can take is to address the issue of political legitimacy. The organization must be willing to take a stronger stance against both military and constitutional coups, regardless of whether the leaders involved are aligned with Western interests. By holding all member states accountable to the same democratic standards, ECOWAS can restore its credibility and reaffirm its commitment to the principles of democracy and good governance. The future of ECOWAS is uncertain, but one thing is clear. The organization cannot continue to function as it has in the past. West Africa is changing, and ECOWAS must change with it. This will require difficult decisions and a willingness to confront the external forces that have held the region back for far too long. So to sum this up, the current crisis facing ECOWAS is not just about military or constitutional coups, it's about the lingering neo-colonial influences that continue to weaken West Africa's ability to act independently. France's seizure of Nigeria's presidential plane was a stark reminder that Africa's old colonial masters are still very much in control, and unless ECOWAS and its member states take decisive action, they will continue to be manipulated from the outside. But there is hope. Nigeria's bold move to seek individual alliances signals a growing awareness that Africa must chart its course, free from external interference. The future of ECOWAS, and indeed all of West Africa, depends on whether the bloc can shake off the chains of neocolonialism and assert its true sovereignty. Africa's destiny is in its own hands, but only if it is willing to confront the uncomfortable truths that have held it back for far too long. Should ECOWAS be replaced with a stronger organization? Is this the moment that calls for true Pan-Africanism? Let us know in the comment section. Can Africa truly unite? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.